There's a word for a person who takes on an entire planet's worth of hostile jerks with nothing but a power suit and an arm cannon, and that word is badass. Samus is quiet, brave, and lethal. All things total badass. And she's even a bounty hunter, arguably one of the most badass professions there is. But who is she really? Metroid games are typically narrative light, and her design suggests she's mostly an empty vessel for the player to embody and share agency with. So is that all Samus's character is? Just a badass suit of armor to fulfill the ultimate spacefaring power fantasy? Let's break it down. Samus Aran is one of my favorite video game characters of all time, and she's kind of an important one too. So I wanted to take this time to make a video critiquing her character, her implementation, and her design across all the Metroid games. And we're gonna start with her history and all of that stuff, like the power suit, what's going on, who even is Samus? Samus lived on K2L until she was 3, when the pleasant Earth colony was destroyed by space pirates. These assholes were led by a giant purple dragon-esque monster named Ridley, who became a pain in the ass in just about every Metroid game ever. Samus's parents sacrificed themselves hero style, buying enough time for the hyper-advanced bird-like race known as the Chozo to intervene and rescue her. The Chozo then raised Samus, into whom they'd pour their strongest powers, and consequently, their greatest burdens. The Chozo are the quintessential precursor-style race that's been traveling through space since humanity was first learning to crawl, a piece of knowledge they would somehow neglect to teach Samus. However, for all the Chozo's amazing technology, they began living too long, and went from being a race of proud warrior explorers to old wise explorers. This transition as a race might explain them putting all their Chozo eggs in one power suit wearing basket. The Chozo made both the Metroids and Mother Brain, both of which kind of became big deals. In fact, Metroid roughly translates to Ultimate Warrior in the Chozo language. Like, you'd think the Ultimate Warrior would be a giant mech suit with the ability to teleport and use ESP or something, but no, just weird levitating ball monster. The Chozo genetically engineered the Metroids to destroy these creatures called X-Parasites, which are able to infect and perfectly mimic any organic host, kill them, and I mean, that's bad enough. I think you get the point. Mother Brain's purpose was simply a helpful technology management AI, kind of like Siri. But both of these things went balls up when Mother Brain betrayed the Chozo and attempted to use the Metroid to effectively reset the universe. Such are the Chozo's crosses to bear. Except, woe is Chozo, they don't do so much the fighting anymore, and now they have doomed the universe. Oops. In comes Samus. The Chozo invented her trademark power suit, which inherits all the abilities and powers that they once employed in combat by installing them in the form of modular upgrades. Her suit is some high-class, magic-tier biological technology, but they never really explain how it works. Regardless, by giving Samus this suit and training her in its application, the Chozo gave the universe what it needs to survive and rectify their mistakes. What's more, the space pirates, being more advanced and well-organized than one might expect from pirates, have absolutely no clue how Samus' suit works. They don't get it. So this character holds with her the combat power of an entire race of ancient creatures and wields it for the sole purpose of cleaning up their mess. A mess that could literally destroy the universe. Eventually. Kind of a lot to take on, right? Now please, do me a huge favor and just keep all that in mind when we get to the later stuff, you know, the other M stuff. It'll be fun, trust me. Samus, bearing the weight of her guilt-infused suit, starts off most of her games rather light, all things considered. The Chozo, along with the other races in some cases, somehow scattered all these upgrades throughout the various planets, and every game you're tasked with reacquiring Samus' power in some fashion. Some fashion indeed, am I right? But what I find so fascinating about Samus' character is that she doesn't care about power acquisition, even though the player does. For the most part, the game's narrative focus is on defeating the big bad, or investigating scientific screw-ups depending on which game it is. During the limited time she spends actually reflecting on her situation, or narrating events, she's a very factual, focused person. For instance, at the beginning of Super Metroid, she returns to the Ceres space station to check on the scientists, not because she was paid to as a bounty hunter, but because Metroids are bad, or they can be used for bad. They're not inherently bad. There's a commentary on humanity and curiosity in there somewhere, but we'll leave that for a different video. Later, in Metroid Fusion, she recounts her history with the Galactic Federation, the grand organization which pays her to do stuff, and is generally bad at keeping its shady dealings with Metroids a secret, not to mention safe. She doesn't like them, surprise surprise, and again, it's because they're incompetent and irresponsible, and because if something goes wrong, she's the only person in the universe who can do anything about it. Not because she just doesn't like them or because she's anti-authority. And besides, it's a pretty annoying position to be in, right? But she hardly says it. Instead, it's conveyed to the player through the gameplay. You have to open all the doors. You have to find and defeat all the bad guys. You never know what the hell is going on, and yet you're going to do it anyway. This reinforces this idea that Samus is only badass, nothing else. She's self-sufficient, the only one worth a damn in the universe, doing what it takes, never worrying why, focused on completing her mission. She's written that way, but more importantly, the games play like she is that way, and you feel like she is that way. Now, even with all this backstory and history, and even some personality profiling, you still don't have a very good idea of what's going on in Samus's head while you're playing, and that's mostly because whatever is in her head is what's in your head. The gameplay tends to fill in all the various gaps about who she is and what she might be thinking while she's doing stuff in space, and that's why when they write things about her that are actually characterizing moments, sometimes it's easy to reject those kinds of things, especially when they're more humanizing factors. Regardless of her role as the player's character, Samus does have some noteworthy characterization throughout the series. At the end of Metroid 2, Return of Samus, a Metroid hatches in front of her as she's escaping the Metroid homeworld and imprints Samus as its mother. Recollecting her own being saved by the Chozo during the raid on K2L, she rescues this Metroid, which he perhaps affectionately refers to as the baby, even though she's specifically on the planet to destroy every last Metroid. However, she leaves it to be studied by the Galactic Federation's scientists, as they claim it can be used for the good of mankind. About 2 seconds later, Ridley jacks the poor thing, which can only be described as bad for mankind. At the end of Super Metroid, this same baby, having since become an Omega Metroid, gives its life to save Samus's. Her attachment to the baby and guilt over its death implied that Samus had a strong maternal instinct. I'd consider saving the animals at the end of Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion better evidence of this, but that was the immediate takeaway, and it's a reasonable one. But she left the Metroid to be studied by scientists. Most mothers probably wouldn't put their tiny child in such a situation, so I don't really buy the maternal instinct character feature. Rather, and again citing her rescuing of harmless creatures in danger, this appears to be an ethical stance passed down from the Chozo. Sure, they bequeathed their fighting abilities to her, but they also raised her on their values. Remember, she was with them until she was about 16. Their universal footprint, as far as we've seen, as it's mostly documented throughout the Prime games, was quite beneficial, often featuring direct efforts to enrich local environments and share wisdom with other spacefaring races. Recall that the Metroids were initially created to stop a species of incredibly dangerous parasites from ever escaping their host planet and destroying all organic life. So, while this doesn't preclude Samus from being motherly, it's more likely that she struggles with having to kill so many hostile creatures on her adventures and is giving back however she can. And then there's all of Other M, wherein she follows strict orders from a father figure named Adam out of respect for his command, has a post-traumatic stress breakdown upon seeing Ridley again, and in general is more vocal about doubts and guilt over her own actions. As of Other M, Samus has been through her Zero mission, all 3 Prime games, Metroid 2, and Super Metroid, which slides directly into Other M's story. Zero mission takes place after she's already established herself as one of the best bounty hunters alive, implying it's been years since her time in the Galactic Federation army, during which she was commanded by Adam, the aforementioned father figure. In light of all of this, regarding her PTSD episode, I'm of 2 minds. Samus's PTSD regarding the loss of her parents to Ridley makes perfect sense and is better explored in the mangas, but PTSD is incredibly serious, and yes, some people experience extremely crippling reactions to triggers depending on the severity of their affliction. That said, her reaction in Other M comes as a surprise considering she's fought Ridley 5 whole times before that in different forms. Why the unprecedented reaction is unclear, and provided she's never reflected on her PTSD in the past, it's a bit of a leap for players to accept. But it's not entirely unreasonable. More importantly, suffering from PTSD is not a sign of weakness. If anything, fighting through it, however strongly it affects her, is a sign of bravery, and tell me that bravery ain't badass. Also in the camp of these things make Samus seem weaker are her guilt and doubts, again mostly expressed in Other M. Such thoughts are things we all have, about things big and small, but the player's own experience playing previous Metroid games suggests Samus never had them because she never mentioned them. Yet, as I've wandered through the complex locations which compose any of the game's entries, I've had plenty of time to be confused, frustrated, and especially lost. Metroid games typically leave Samus alone in imposing environments. Her having doubts or stressing about her role in the universe in these moments is totally justified. Perhaps she was indeed always just a stalwart badass with literally zero fears and concerns, but I find that unlikely. People have doubts because they have goals, confident or not, powerful or not. Being the one person who can correct an entire race's misdeeds makes failure an opportunity for self-blame, even when it's not her fault. It makes sense, even if its only portrayal in the series thus far has been, let's say, exaggerated. And lastly, players of Metroid games up to Other M have played through Metroid Fusion, which specifically mentions how much Samus despises being ordered around, but also mentions that her old commander, Adam, was like a best friend to her, one of the few that understood her while she was in the Galactic Federation army. For the sake of brevity, let's ignore the arguably poor portrayal of Samus and Adam's relationship in Other M, and simply take it for what it's meant to be, one of mutual respect. Recall the Chozo and Samus' relationship. They rescued and raised her, but also burdened her with preventing their creations from destroying the universe. She's no stranger to acting out of appreciation. So when it comes to Adam and the events of Other M, again, disregarding the plot contrivances and generally hokey writing, which I know is hard, it stands to reason that Samus holds herself to a standard of excellence in performance, be it in service of the Chozo, herself, or a person she genuinely respects. It just doesn't ever feel like that's actually happening while you're playing Other M. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't be true. Instead of quietly passing milestones, determinedly pursuing a well-defined and simple goal, Samus is reacting to someone else, to what they think is best. Instead of having your own time to reflect while playing the game, Samus does it for you. In this fashion, Other M overwrites the gaps in Samus' character filled in by past games, and as such, I totally get any frustration people might feel over her portrayal in that game. By the end of Metroid Fusion, Samus is even more badass than when she started, and that is the latest game in the chronology, even though Other M is the latest one to come out, and both of those games characterized her more than any of the games prior. Now, whether or not you like knowing more about Samus, or if you'd rather her be a blank slate, that's totally up to you. But either way, all of the difficulties that she overcomes, fighting monsters 10 times her size, some of which have personal mental effects on her, that is what makes her badass. Not just winning, not just killing everything, but that she keeps trying, despite all the stuff that tries to hold her back. That is what makes her badass. And her arm cannon. That also helps. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it because I enjoyed making it, and I'm not sure how many of these video game character profile type videos I'll be doing, but let me know if you enjoyed the format. And if you did enjoy the format, let me know below if there's a character that you think that I could cover in this way, and I'll keep them in mind. Critiquing characters' designs and implementations along with going into their history is something that I've always enjoyed doing, and hopefully you guys will too. In the meantime, check out these other videos I've done on Metroid things, and I will see you next time.